So as we're getting ready to get going, Tom Ashbrook is joining us remotely, and I will do introductions in a moment. But as he's doing it remote, you see him over there, and it's angled such that he can see the panelists, but doesn't really allow the people on this half of the room to see him that well. So if you want to have a good view of Tom on the monitor, I would encourage a left shift to this half of the room so you can see Tom on the monitor. You do not have to. If you do not want to see him, you're maybe used to hearing him on the radio, so it may be disconcerting to actually put a face to the voice. But please take the opportunity to shift to the other half of the room. Or not, that's fine too. Okay? Wanted to give you the opportunity. Oh, and the other point of coordination. So we see this URL on the screen, www.pigeonhole.at. If you go to that address, and then also the password is SENSE.nano live. At any point, you can text your questions. There'll be two boxes that you have to click next through to get to the instructions. But text your questions. You may not see them immediately because an administrator will pass them through so that we're getting anything inappropriate passed through. And then those questions will be made available to Tom, who will, at his discretion, select which ones to put forth to the panel. Okay, so with that, I am going to introduce our panel chair and our panelists and then turn it over to, I guess I'll stand over here so Tom can see me as well. I'll stand behind the panelists so Tom can see me. So first of all, it's my great pleasure to introduce Tom Ashbrook, who I'm sure most of you have heard, and some of you, if you moved to the other half of the room, could see. Host of NPR, or host of On Point on NPR, and has been in journalism in a number of ways for 20 years and is now, I think through some indoctrination over the last couple of weeks, a lifelong fan of MIT.nano and what we're trying to do. So I thank Tom for his time and energy today, and Tom will be leading an excellent conversation today. Before I turn it over to Tom, let me introduce our panelists, some of which you've already met today. My cheat sheet. So first of all, start over this way, Vladimir Bulović, who you've met. But in addition to the things we've already said today, certainly heavily involved in innovation entrepreneurship activities on campus and co-directs the innovation initiative at MIT. So Vladimir, thank you. You're not sitting in the order of my So Katie Ray, who is the president and CEO of the Engine Accelerator. So you may have heard of the Engine. So she's, before taking on that role, she was the managing director of Techstars Boston, where she led investments in more than 70 high-growth startups across a broad range of sectors, and innovated in the freemium business model at Lycos. Sitting out of order. David Mindell, professor of history of engineering and manufacturing and professor of aeronautics and astronautics at MIT, researching a myriad of relationships between people and machines, and you heard from his recent startup company earlier in the day. Katie Stebbins, and I have to go to the cheat sheet to actually get the title correct. Katie is the Assistant Secretary of Innovation, Technology, and Entrepreneurship in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Leads the state's efforts in the areas of cybersecurity, robotics, digital health, advanced manufacturing. She served in the public sector for over 20 years, playing a leadership role in community engagement, economic development, in particular in low-income communities. And then Professor Jim Collins. Okay, there we go. Professor of Bioengineering in the Department of Biological Engineering and in IMES, the Institute for Medical Engineering and Science. He's helped launch a number of companies, including Sample 6 Technologies, Synlogic, and Enbiotics, also a recipient of the MacArthur Genius Award. Panelists, thank you for your time today. The spirit of today for this, Tom has been with us all day remotely, listening as we normally listen to him. So he's now fully immersed in what we're talking about for SENSE.nano and nanotechnology at MIT. The hope today for the panel is to talk a little bit about the societal implications, good and bad, and our esteemed panelists will share their expertise on that, being led by Tom. So Tom, please amplify the introduction of yourself as you see fit and take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian, and hello to everyone in the hall. I'm sorry I'm not there. I was over just 10 days ago to see the new building with Vladimir and Brian. It is fantastic. If you haven't toured it, I encourage you to get in there. It's just incredible. In the interim, I have had a health event, which puts me here, not there with you today, and I'm sorry for that. It's an event that leaves me wishing that this nanotechnology would get going and hurry up. About last week, I had, I don't know, a 14-inch, looks like a samurai sword, sliced into my torso and some vascular surgery done. I would have far preferred if you all would speed this up, and a few years from now, you could have detected the problem earlier and maybe solved it with nanobots, and there would be no scalpels involved. But until that day, at least for today, I'm with you remotely and very happy to be so. It's been incredible to listen and watch throughout the course of this day for a guy like me who's always looking for those phrases that will get listeners' attention. This day is full of them, starting with your MIT president there talking just about simply disruptive nano sensing, and right on down, I mean, bio-integrated neural devices and stretchable photonics and continuous, non-invasive, artifact-free physiological monitoring. I mean, you just keep going. Sensor tattoos and mice who live entire lives with nanosensors inside, motion magnified, micro-location, artificial skin, quantum dots. This has been a real feast for me. I'm a nano neophyte, but it's completely compelling. And I can't help but feel envious for those of you who work in the field. I'm really eager to dive in with the panel and with all of you in the hall and look forward to your questions, which I'm told will show up on the screen here at my place. So without further ado, David, can I come first to you? You are a professor of the history of science. How big a deal is nanotechnology? I know it's a broad question, but as I absorb the implications of what I'm hearing today, I'm trying to place it in the sort of pantheon of enormous breakthroughs or scientific developments. Give us a sense of the scale of its significance as we begin this century.
Well, that part of my life is as a historian. We're very good at looking back and much less good at looking forward. I think, like many of these revolutions, the actual outlines of the importance will probably only become clear over time, and some level not in the ways we expected, that you pretty much know for sure. And it's fascinating to watch all the small innovations and which ones catch on and which ones won't as you lead up to what is basically a kind of fundamentally new way of interacting with the world. To me, that's what's most exciting. I think both the sensing and the acting part of it, we've been very good at the macro scale. We've been very good at studying the micro scale, and we're getting better and better at manipulating at the micro scale.
I found myself wondering, if you look down the road far enough, is there a point at which nanoscale becomes the norm, and we don't use saws and hammers anymore? Somehow, everything is done at the molecular level. Is that absurd to imagine? Or one day will we have a quaint name for all the things that we do with the tools in the tool shed now?
Well, I think Vladimir is probably the best person to answer that. But I do think, you know, a lot of these things, you certainly see it in the worlds that I work in, which is more in robotics and AI, that the really interesting things come not when you're trying to do what you used to do with a new tool, but you're using the new tool to do something entirely different and really restructuring the scale at which you think. I'm thinking about like Neil Gershenfeld's work, where you really have to change the way you think about structures to think about nanofabricated structures. And a lot of the things that we've seen here today are in that mode, but it takes time to work that through. So it's very exciting.
Vladimir, how about it? Conventional fabrication as we know it. I don't know, look 50 or 100 years down the road, and we'll reel it way back in from there. But I find myself just sort of flabbergasted with the potential here. Is it possible that the molecular level fabrication and interaction with the physical world at some point becomes the norm and everything else seems primitive?
So Tom, you know, you might be surprised to hear me say that the future will be measured in nanometers. Because indeed,
not so surprised.
There are many examples one can cite, and I often look at very simple things that I really know very little about. But when it comes to cells themselves, back in the end of the 19th century, I'm told people started speculating there might be something inside the cells that might define who we are. And then it took over half a century to actually get to the point where we saw an inkling of what eventually became known as DNA. But that inkling was a diffraction image that kind of looked like an unusual pattern of spots on a piece of paper. And there was a long debate, and people said, well, I guess after a while, this must be a twisted molecule that's inside us. Now, if I go ahead and look at that journey that took over half a century and compare it to today, where you can tell to a graduate student, that undergraduate that just wants to join a lab, he's very curious about seeing DNA. Could you just go and split a cell and put it under a scanning tunneling microscope and just take the image, right? And in a couple of hours, if everything goes well, you will get a picture of a twisted molecule because you finally have nanoscale tool sets to understand how things truly look down there. As Phil Sharp here at MIT would say, picture is not worth 1,000 words, it's worth 1,000,000 words. And we finally have ways to actually explore the nanoscale. I mentioned before that it was only in the 1980s that we, for the first time, saw atoms. Now, we speculated there are such things as atoms, and indeed, everything fit perfectly when it comes to assumption there must be atoms down there, but scanning tunneling microscopy was the first time that we actually saw individual atoms and saw how they're positioned and saw the hexagonal patterns of graphite and whatever else which started leading from that. But that's only 30 years ago. And you would imagine the first decade of that was spent poking around the nanoscale, just being happy to see another atom, right? And then moving around and building on that now maybe a couple of atoms put together to make what now we call quantum corrals. And then only in the beginning of the 21st century did we start saying, well, this might be actually scalable and applicable and truly can lead us to innovations. We are right now, as I mentioned before at the conference, we are right now at the renaissance age of nanotechnology. We're just beginning to start applying the first insights we have. And this is first of many, many insights to come. So yes, I do think that the future will be measured in nanometers. And you name the discipline, nanoscale will be the ultimate measure that we'll need to understand to advance the discipline forward.
Katie Ray, you're an investor and have been for a long time. How do you see how pregnant is this field? Is it fully ready for capital to come in and go to town, go to the races? Is the renaissance here? Or in terms of investment opportunities, does it still look like early days to you?
I don't think there's a blanket answer to that. I think there are many areas that are ready and interesting and many that are way too far out and still really in scientific mode, kind of R&D scientific discovery mode. It's just a tough question to answer, but we're certainly looking at what's coming out of the labs and what's interesting. And I think, from an investor standpoint, there has to be an entrepreneur that wants to grow that business. And I think there are many, many things happening in nano that certainly should have investment dollars and should come out of the lab and be large companies. So we're bullish and can't wait to see what Vlad's going to create and everybody else involved in the field.
Jim Collins, when you look at this with your background, do you see this as the golden horde that's coming to take over all the other areas, all the domains at MIT? Does everything flow into nanotechnology? Is it early tiptoes now? What impresses you most about what you've heard today and what you see rising here?
I'm most impressed on not only how this field, broad field of these disciplines are going to be impacting so many different other fields, but be a bit selfish, I'm excited as to what it can do in biology in particular. And in fact, if Phil Sharp were here, he would share that over a third of activities at MIT now touch upon biology. And I think the nano efforts are going to be fundamental. So living cells are on the micro scale, but the inner workings of a cell are on the nanoscale. And our abilities to manipulate, to measure, to program are just beginning to take off. And it's turned out that it's not as easy as we thought. So biology is remarkably complicated and complex. But I'm excited on what the nano field with the engineers, physicists, and mathematicians can bring to really expand our ability to harness the power and diversity of biology.
Where do you see early opportunities potentially in that?
I think probably the most promising right now are in diagnostics. And therapeutics, it's always hard. Therapeutics, the time frame for therapeutics is 10, 20 years out. But I think at the diagnostics level, nano can really, and is beginning to make a difference. We have here a number of demos from companies that are going to be involved with the center. But the ability to take a sample from a patient or take a sample from a plant or from a consumer good and to be able to assess authenticity and or assess is it infected and or damaged or diseased, I think will be transformed in just the next few years by a number of different nanotechnologies.
Katie Stebbins, you're involved in so much in getting fields up and running. Does nanotechnology look like an easy lift to you? Does it look like you need a different structure of support for it? Does Massachusetts look well positioned to push the frontier?
Well, I'm biased. I have to say I think Massachusetts is well positioned to push every frontier.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think there's any frontier I don't want us pushing. I frequently talk about the supercluster in Massachusetts, and I really do believe we're experiencing a supercluster right now. I do think that makes us well positioned, not only just in a singular view at Nano, but looking at all the other related pieces we have at our fingertips. I think the opportunity to experience innovation here, the multiplier effects are just infinite. It is a very exciting time. The state is certainly looking at where we can invest money in sensor technology, nanosensor technology for sure. And so it's not that we look at picking winners and losers. We're trying to invest in those sort of common denominators across tech in the state that we think we can build multiple numerators on top of. And I don't see this as being any different.
Vladimir, the theme for the day is ubiquitous sensing. And I wish you would define that in its fullest terms. If I really take it literally, ubiquitous sensing, it's kind of this overwhelming sense of the entire physical world and beyond, having a new level of self-awareness. But how do you define ubiquitous sensing?
The way that we try to define it, given the fact how broad the topic is focus on man and machine and built environment and the environment itself, giving us many levers to access data on how the world around us truly functions. With the data sets, we can then go ahead and take the next set of actions. Is it to cure a disease? Is it to recognize the changing climate? Is it to improve the soil conditioning? The data sets allow us then to connect that to the performance of the environment around us. And as a result, hopefully provide better crop yields or feed more people in general, or indeed recognize opportunities for improving health more globally. Sensing technology is a very broad one. And indeed, the reason why the very first Center of Excellence of MIT.nano is focused on sensing as a topic is to highlight the inclusiveness of nanotechnology across all the fields here at MIT. I mean, I don't mean to stray away from the statement, but I would like to add to Jim's statement, which is 1/3 of the faculty of MIT do work on biology. I would ask what fraction of MIT faculty work on nanotechnology a little more broadly. And in the School of Science, that would be about 51% of the recently tenured professors. And in the School of Engineering, it's about 67% of recently tenured professors. And that is not by choosing the field. That's by choosing the topic and the opportunity of using MIT.nano as the next blending pot, the place that will cause that human friction, that will cross the disciplines, allow us to, through the human friction, generate innovation that will be able to propel us beyond what any one of the fields right now are able to do. And so when you ask me what is the sensing technology for ubiquitous sensing, it's really your imagination. You know, indeed, you started by asking, is it possible to indeed not subject you to a samurai sword, but come up with a simpler way of indeed operating and identifying the issues. And yes, if we had plenty of sensors, if we had the ways of diagnosing minute amounts of chemicals inside your body and identifying the regions where those extra chemicals that shouldn't be there are starting to accumulate, well, yes, we would be able to indeed solve diseases and provide cures more easily, but we do need an entirely new class of sensing technology that we can now start to develop, given all the insights we have over the last couple of decades of exploration.
David, how far can you imagine then, if it's up to our imaginations, how deeply and widely can you imagine nano-level sensing technology being integrated into our living and material world? How deeply could you see it going?
Yeah. So the easiest. Oh, I'm sorry, David. Please.
Please?
No, I insist.
Well, I mean,
I
actually,
misunderstood.
I share to a great degree Vladimir's vision of the kind of relationship to the environment. So to me, I work in robotics. Things are a little more concrete, but people, robots, and infrastructure, people, places, and things are really the three elements of the human-built world. And the infrastructure already has a lot of intelligence built into it, just by architectural shapes and the kind of way we move through the environment. But the lines between the built environment and the digital world, and I think it's true of the biological world too, are still pretty rigidly drawn, and there's not a lot of fluidity there. As we imagine things becoming smarter in any number of ways, then you'll move through a world that's smart in additional ways to the way that we already do. And you know, there's of course issues about privacy and how much openness we want, and there's a lot of social dimensions to how does that change the way that we interact with each other. We're experiencing all of those things with, I mean, at some level, the current political questions about politics and the internet are really, that's, you know, 1990s or even maybe 1960s technology that we're only beginning to work our way through. So it'll be a long time before we really think through the social dimensions of nanotechnology, but they'll be handled one at a time. And you know, I always come back to there's actually a tremendous amount of choice in how we choose to deploy technologies in our world by what we choose to put in our backpack in the morning or what we choose to sit down and log into. And those are choices every one of us makes every day, and I don't think that'll be any different with nanotechnology. And you know, we'll sort of feel our way through it in the same kind of fits and starts that we've done with the digital world so far.
I mean, Jim, we already heard this morning about spinach emailing us about explosives, I think it was, or whatever it was. Can you imagine that we end up with a different relationship with, let's take the living world, that we might have, we get vaccinations now. In the future, might we start life getting some kind of load of nanosensors that would stay with us throughout life? We already heard today from Extreno about mice who live with nanosensors their entire lives. Might we do the same with a constant monitoring of biofeedback beyond our own bodies? Might we have a different interaction with the rest of the living world? If spinach is going to be emailing us, how far does that go?
So I could envision us harnessing more and more living diagnostics. And by living diagnostics, I would put it still within the banner of nanotech, in the sense that we now have the capability to program living cells to sense their environments and report on their environments. And efforts here at MIT and elsewhere have already advanced this, where one can now program bacteria to detect the presence of a pathogen in a patient, as well as to detect things like inflammation. So instead of undergoing a routine endoscopic exam, the notion here is you might be able to just simply take a pill of a bacterium that could then go in and report on, is there inflammation in your GI tract and where is it? Taking your specific question, I could envision potentially seeing the opportunity to program, whether young folks or others, with bacteria that could report and or to remediate certain conditions. But on the reporting side, I think we're still faced with a general challenge around diagnostics, which is even if one can measure, if you don't actually have an ability to treat, what are you measuring, and is there a need to know that you have an issue? And that, I think, remains a challenge for many of the situations that we'd like to be able to treat. We don't yet have the ability to treat.
We heard the phrase biointegrated neural devices early on today. That makes one imagine somebody tapping in to our nerve system, our neural system, our brains. How far does that go?
It could go quite far. We have a long way to go. I was on a panel a long time ago with a noted futurist who predicted in 2000 that in 25 years we'd be able to reverse engineer the human brain and make measurements on it and infer what was happening. And now we're 17 years on, and we're not even close to being able to do that. And I maintain that even if you're given 3 interconnected neurons, you can't actually reverse engineer those connections or what they're doing. And so there's still a real challenge on coupling the science and making the advances. So there's still a big gap between technology being advanced and the biological insights that can be gleaned from those and/or medical insights. And unfortunately, the slopes on those 2 areas are really unmatched right now. So we still have a long way to go to ramp up our biological capability to, say, take those multi-electrode implants that are being developed and actually infer an understanding of what's happening with that patient or with the individual that you've wired up.
Katie Ray, we heard Raphael Wright this morning talk about disruptive nano sensing. When you look at nano sensing and nanotechnology more broadly, where do you see the greatest likelihood of disruption coming, Katie?
You know, I don't know that I have a perfect answer for that. My hack on this is to look at where the entrepreneurs see it. And so that's kind of my role, is to really get in and talk to lots of different people who are researching in this area and then see a true application in the world that somebody might pay for someday and have a true economic model behind it. So I'm more in the translation out of the lab. And so I wish I had an answer for you. It's these 3 things, but I think it's, you know, we're seeing a bunch of stuff around agriculture that I think could be very interesting. Certainly anything that has to do with keeping humans safe, sensing chemicals. I think you know, all the cyber attack world has lots of implications for nano, which are interesting, and then anything in human health. You know, Jim's talking about inflammation, but there's lots of areas that are close things like inflammatory bowel disease, like how much more could we know about that and actually help people, or Lyme's disease, or things where like we kind of know there's a bacteria and a pathogen, and then we understand kind of, are people still infected? What does that look like? And is there a way to have sensors around that? So I just try to translate the science into a real use case that then could become a business out of that. And there are too many areas to say it's these 3. I mean, we're seeing it all over the place in every different kind of industry and application, from buildings and robots to inside the human body. So it's awesome, and there's a long way to go till spinach is emailing us. But I think we are making, like, the amount of progress that happens every 2 to 3 years is enormous, and I think accelerating. And you know, that's why I think we're living in such an exciting time in the nano space.
I mean, Vladimir, we've experienced so much disruption with the internet and the oncoming the arrival of the digital age. How would you compare the arrival? What should we anticipate in terms of the quality or texture of disruption in the nano era compared to what we've experienced in the lifetimes of everybody here in the internet/digital era so far?
I think it's even bigger. I mean, in some ways, the internet was like connecting information that was distant from you. Now, this is like 1,000 times bigger set of data, or 10,000, or 1,000,000 times bigger. I don't know. So somebody from MIT should quantify it. Yeah. But the depth of information and understanding, and then complexity that creates, is much bigger than the internet. And that's both exciting and hard to get your hands around and your mind around all the changes that are coming. So,
Vladimir, take that one on, if you would. The quality of disruption we're likely to see with the growth of this field, this arena.
I think it's opportunity is vast, as Katie said, and indeed, I think you're going to start recognizing that the sensing technology around you will enable you to do things that you will start taking for granted. Now, I would highlight the fact that my pants don't wrinkle anymore, right? Because I have nanoscale fibers inside them. And my shirt doesn't get stained very much if I spill ketchup because there's a nanoscale coating on that. Now, did I know I needed that, right, a couple of decades ago? I mean, certainly it's a nice feature, but it wasn't necessarily a blockbuster understanding that this would become a blockbuster need, or the fact that my shirts are whiter than white because they have a nanoscale phosphors that make detergents, luminesce under sunlight. So there are many new things that get developed nearly every day when it comes to sensing technologies. We have this website, sense.mit.edu. Click on the news section of that, and that is just last 6 months of stories. Maybe there are 50 stories in there, and just pulled out of our easiest source, which is MIT News. Our writers at MIT could likely write 10 times more stories than that if they had time to put down everything in writing. Many of those ideas will not go anywhere, meaning out of the 3,000 great ideas, one becomes a blockbuster product. 150 patents might come out of it, right? But the opportunity to then ask, what is the next sets of transformation, I think it's very rational to expect surfaces, anything we interact with, to go ahead and give us response back. How come my chair doesn't know that I'm sitting here, and maybe it's recognizing that I really need a glass of water right now? I mean, it should, right? Because it will go and provide me extra function that I might find truly desirable. How come that chair, oh, thank you. We share everything around here.
Could I add to that a little bit?
Yeah, please, Katie.
So from a different perspective, which is a community-based perspective, so I've spent the last 20 years doing environmental planning and city planning, as Brian said, in low-income areas. And one of the biggest challenges we have is getting people to go to work and go to school, and you realize when you start to dive into people's lives, one of the big social determinants of health, is the environment around you. And so people aren't opting out of life, they're sick. And so I co-chair the Governor's Digital Health Council, and we talk a lot about digital health, but this world very quickly intersects, because when we talk about air quality and water quality, when we talk about families that are getting their protein source out of a pond, and that fish in those ponds are contaminated with mercury, but we don't have a good way to test real time for that. And we don't have good information to give to doctors of real-time information about the environment that patients are ingesting and breathing and experiencing. It's hard to diagnose accurately. It's hard to understand better prevention models. And so in my space, when we look at how much money we spend in the public realm to try and make people well without really understanding from an everyday environment standpoint what's making them sick, I think nanosensing technology, for me in thinking about the work I've done for 20 years, just provides so much opportunity for this ubiquitous amount of data so that we just know more and we know better, and I can pinpoint quicker why blocks and blocks of a neighborhood aren't well, why asthma rates are so much higher than they should be, why so many people can't go to work and school and be active and productive members of society, not by their own choosing, but because of pollutants we're choosing to put into the air as a result of other issues. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
There's the upside. I want to come back to the potential downside, but David, what about that kind of ubiquity of sensing in our environment that would permit that kind of almost public health feedback? Do you see that as near-term, mid-term, long-term? How deep an application of nano sensing would be required to begin to have a meaningful impact, take us to a sort of next level understanding of the quality, the texture of our environment beyond what we have now?
It's a tough one to answer, but I think that, clearly we're already affecting the environment in invisible ways, and that therefore it's essential that we be able to have that feedback from the environment in those ways. And at some level, what used to be considered mysterious forces of nature are now understood to have scientific basis to them, although a lot of it is still invisible. And I think a lot of the technologies we saw here today are partly about teasing that world out and making it visible, either for medical diagnostic purposes or even for a kind of daily purpose. And there are huge social effects to be seen from that.
So are you saying that it would be an ideal way to have a conversation with planet Earth by using all the information that finally she can talk back to us because we finally know how to listen?
I mean, that's a great way to describe it, I think. I mean, I think you already do that with your environment in ways that you're sometimes aware of and sometimes not aware of. And again, there's a lot happening out there that is either natural or human-made that is affecting us. And some of it's good and some of it's less good. And the stuff that's less good, it's good to know what it is and avoid it.
But the world will be speaking back to us in a way if it has ubiquitous sensing in a way that it hasn't. What about the downside of that? I mean, I'm going to begin to go to the questions from the audience here. And one of them, oh, I just lost it, but it had to do with, I think, nanofibers, maybe to your lovely wrinkle-free pants, Vladimir, and concern already environmentally about the consequences of that. What about the potential downside implications of nanotechnology, even the sensors themselves? We started out this morning hearing about the greatest engineering disaster in American history, the St. Francis Dam collapse of 1928. In nanotechnology terms, what's the greatest potential collapse or fiasco? Do we begin to unzip the world somehow, unravel it somehow? Jim, what's the downside here, whether it's in sunscreen or in wrinkle-free clothing, nanofibers breaking down, or larger potential breakdowns? What are the frontiers of concern that we should also be alert to as we move into the nano era?
Well, firstly, less concerning, I realize from this panel, I clearly need to go clothes shopping with Vladimir.
We can all see that, Jim.
Yeah, no, I can see I do not have wrinkle-free pants on today.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, I think I work in synthetic biology, this relatively new field that touches very much on nanobiotechnology, that's bringing engineers in with biologists. And there's been concern since the beginning of that field, and thus it touches upon nanobiotech, about unintended consequences. So as we're engineering living organisms, engineering biology, what could happen as one puts that into a patient's body or puts that into the environment to sense something? And I think any of these things carry risks that we have to be very careful on, and to do as much work as one can to address what could be the consequences and weigh the upside with the downside. On the body side, we see in this area of the country, Boston in particular, on biotech, that many good intentions can actually have some unintentional negative side effects. And luckily, that hasn't slowed any of us down. But I suspect on the nanotech side, one could envision that certain things you could put in somebody's body, the body may not like, or maybe that individual specific body may not like. And we have to be sensitive to that, and thus also have safety measures in place. So if you're going to put a living diagnostics, it's important to have a safety switch or a biocontainment system that could eliminate that living diagnostic from the person and or from the environment once it leaves the person.
We do have examples from the past. I mean, asbestos used to be a really magical good thing from perspective of, is it going to be glue or insulation or whatever else we were using it for? But we found out, because we finally had sensitive enough instruments to recognize the damage it's doing to us. So I think on one end, the nanotech, and in this case, the nanoscale fibers in the asbestos, they were highly carcinogenic. But because we could see the nanoscale, we could recognize the damage they were doing. And so I think the opportunity will be vast in recognizing the indeed ills we are doing with nanotech, at the same time, vastness of opportunity to open up new horizons for the good. And yes, some of those missteps will indeed lead to some negative outcomes, but hopefully we can stop them quickly enough, because finally we'll be able to see the negative elements of nanoscale and hence stop those and adapt the good ones. Well, any time that I often ask a question of how big is, vitamin C or, ibuprofen or aspirin. And you can look at those molecules and they're 1 nanometer in size. So those are really good nanoscale objects that we discovered and have done a great deal of good for us. Similarly, the way we smell things, all those scents are 1 nanometer in size. When you appreciate vanilla, it's because you have nanoscale receptors in your nose that are able to distinguish those. But there are also some bad smells. So the point being that I think nanoscale will open up some dangerous horizons, but also open up plenty of opportunity. But if we sense what is happening down on that scale, we'll be able to make choices.
Pick up the challenge of Vincent Roche this morning. I mean, he brought up the St. Francis Dam collapse. Now, that's a little bit different than a bad smell. In the nano world, what might an equivalent be? Have you begun to imagine? I mean, for citizens, for the government, to have in mind potential larger scale downsides. Do we even know yet? Can you foresee, Vladimir?
Well, I would say that in the example of the collapse of the dam, if we had today's technology, for example, Bill Friedman's technology of monitoring vibration, we might have been able to recognize that the dam is about to critically break. If we had advancements in nanoscale cement that recently recognized you can make a stronger nanocrystals of concrete if you choose to actually de-intensify carbon compared to calcium, well, that would have been a stronger dam, right? So there are, I think, a variety of opportunities. But, the dangerous things, I think the one we fear the most is inadvertent introduction of bad chemicals into the environment. Is it in the form of pesticides that in some ways are going to affect us or kill our crops? Or is it in another biological agent that Jim is an expert in? And indeed, we can dream up bad scenarios, but many of those bad scenarios were accidents of good scenarios. And as long as we can controllably observe, again, what's happening down on that scale, sense how things are developing on nanoscale, we can make choices. Are we going to develop good or bad things?
Jim, how do we keep the guardrails on so we don't get nanomanufacturing reproducing dangerous, you name it, pathogens? Is that something that's already being done? Is there a need here for regulation? Is that a swear word in the world of nano research?
Yeah, it's already being done. So our ability now to synthesize DNA has advanced dramatically. Our ability to reprogram and re-engineer organisms has expanded dramatically. There are already good, extensive regulations in place to prevent the creation of what would be a bioweapon. I think the groups that are out there that are synthesizing DNA actually talk to each other. So if there are orders that come in that are suspect, the source of those orders are checked out immediately. Having said that, a comment that I make all the time, the FBI regularly shows up in my office wanting to talk about dangers. And I tell them that nature's going to get us, that as clever as we are, nature's a lot more clever. And that the probability that there'll be something out there that could do untoward harm is very real, and it's with great probability it's going to come from nature. And thus, we're nano, and really from the sensing, the theme of this in society, where we can do much better good is actually having the ability to sense these pathogen outbreaks more rapidly.
Katie Stebbins, what about the environment in Massachusetts in regulatory terms compared to other regions around the country or around the world when it comes to nano research? Where are the guardrails here? Are there any at this point? Are you recommending any? Is it more or less open than states or countries that we might be competing with?
That's a good question. Right now we're trying to figure out the guardrails on self-driving cars. And so we haven't gotten to quite down far enough on this road from a regulatory standpoint, at least not in the position I'm in. Right now, again, we're just trying to figure out what unmanned vehicles are going to be like on our roads. But I think that that's very real. And I think what we're seeing is as technology is evolving very rapidly, it's also incredible how quickly the regulatory questions are coming up. And it comes at us very fast. And what we find is when we sit down with the governor and we sit down with our teams and talk about it, there's such a learning curve of just understanding all the pieces to it. And there is a desire to regulate to the worst case scenario. And what we're constantly cautioning on, and what I feel like I'm always cautioning on, is you don't want to do that at the expense of having innovation. And so there's a very interesting tension that we have to balance, which is protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the public, but not doing it at the expense of making sure that innovation can move forward. Massachusetts, being the leading technology state in the country, we like to lead. As I said, we like to lead on everything. So we don't want to be over-regulating on things. At the same time, we're a state with a very, very activist population and a very educated population that tends to be in the know, so they will also come to us very quickly with concerns because they're just a very educated population. So Massachusetts can both lead on technology, lead on regulation, but it's very interesting to see the tension between the two, and I have no doubt we'll see that play out in this area as well.
The
Let's look at more
regulators have
questions from
such
the
a hard
audience
time.
here. I'm sorry, did I interrupt someone?
Yeah, I was
No.
just going to say, I
Katie,
mean,
please.
having been involved in a lot of disruptive technology, the regulators are in such a hard spot because they are not experts in any of the technology, so they're always trying to catch up. I think nano will only make it worse because it's easy to see a car, it's a physical item. Everybody understands what it is. As soon as you go nano, whoa, that's tough on the regulators.
We do have entrepreneurs who come to us and say, we're going to have to set national standards will have to be set. We'd like for Massachusetts to be a leader in setting those national standards so that the entire country can then see Massachusetts as the baseline. And so I think that's a space where we're always looking to push the envelope.
But just imagine if you had sensing technology that made the motion of a nanoparticle through a body as obvious as a left turn that self-driving car is making. I just need a good sensing technology that happens to be able to see nanoscale.
A question from the hall along those lines. This is from Diane. Can you please comment on how disruptive nano-sense tech might be in the field of autonomous vehicles and transportation as a whole? I don't know, Vladimir or David or whoever might pick that up.
Well, I'll gladly give some examples. I mean, imaging is really important when it comes to self-driving vehicles, and being able to see different colors than the ones that our eye sees are really important advancements. Specifically, some colors of light can go through fog much more readily than visible light can, and being able to observe objects in front of you, again, if you could see different colors of spectra, that'd be very, very valuable. There are ways of doing that, but cost effectively, nanoscale technology seems to be the one that could provide us in the long run, actually even the short run, nanoscale sensors that could see very much more than our eyes can, and that would be very, very valuable. There are also miniaturizations in LiDAR technology that allow you to figure out how far away objects are as you're approaching them and so forth. And again, that is all about developing nanoscale light sources that happen to be able to be perfectly controlled and perfectly timed so you can recognize distances. Those are some of the obvious ones. But then, if you also don't like the rain on your windshield, you can use Kripa Varanasi's water beading technology to, if you don't like dust on your windshield, you can use that same technology as well. I mean, there are things for comfort and then there are things for benefit of a better car, and both would be addressed. And actually, right now, technologies do exist that can address both needs of the self-driving cars.
David, let's open up the societal lens more here. I don't know how much you've thought about it, but how do you see the societal implications of increasingly widespread application, integration of nanosensing and nanotechnology more broadly? What questions does it raise? What impacts? How might it change the way society works, how it understands itself?
Well, actually, to keep with the self-driving car analogy for a moment, partly because it's one I think a lot about, I think one of the differences between now and the 20th century when the dam broke is that we better, if not perfectly, understand that the risk management is part of the technology. And the regulation, on the one hand, the regulators are always playing backup, and on the other hand, or catch up, and on the other hand, the regulation is the place where social acceptance and sort of societal protection has to meet the technology. And when you look at a new startup or what will eventually become a successful startup, they have to be places where they can manage risk and liability and a regulatory environment, even if they're looking 5 years out for it. And the impacts on self-driving cars, and it's going to be true of Nano too, are going to be the places where all of those things can kind of come into harmony. And the risk is at least understood well enough, or it's engineered in or out in some way from the first principles. Those are all quite different to the way that some of the scarier technologies were developed in the 20th century, when there was a lot more kind of close your eyes and you won't notice the radioactive waste going into the creek kind of thing, and it's only later. Now we're much better at thinking those problems through earlier on. I don't think we've got it down yet. I think we need to do a lot more to understand how to do that. But the successful nanotechnologies, whatever they're going to be, are going to be things that successfully navigate this full chain of risk, regulation, acceptance, and they're all part of it. They're not external forces. And that doesn't necessarily answer the question of what kind of society we're going to have, other than it's still up to us and ought to be up to us what kind of society we have through the regulators in the self-driving car case and autonomous aircraft case. They were under a lot of political pressure to make these things happen because the population through the political system wants it to happen for a variety of reasons. And I'm sure that's true in the nano sector as well. And so, those are all places that have to be worked kind of in concert. And through, a lot of people who do that work are very smart, thoughtful people, and they really don't want to inhibit the technology, but they do want to protect the population, and it's always something that has to be worked together. I think MIT is better than it used to be about seeing that total system and understanding, although that's why we have a policy person on the panel and a financial person on the panel for these kind of questions.
I guess I wonder, you cited some downsides of 20th century technology that emerged. Here, the deliberate and intended consequence is of knowing a lot more about perhaps almost everything. Ubiquitous sensing, that's quite a big idea. So much of our society has been built around an acceptance of what we don't know. I mean, I don't know who to direct this to on the panel, but if so much more is known about the environment around us, about our own internal organs and even neurology, what are the societal implications of that? Pick it up, anyone who will. When we are so much more transparent to ourselves and perhaps to one another and perhaps to third parties.
Well, I mean, I'll start. I think I mentioned this before, but I think there's this kind of information explosion, right, that happens, and how do you make sense of that, I think is really hard for human beings, but might be easier for, this is why human-computer interaction is so important and will become even more important with the more data we have. But I think from the entrepreneurial perspective, I think the things that will win will distill that data so that it's not overwhelming to us, but actually useful. And so I think that's a really rich area to dive into. And you've seen early days of that, like the Fitbit and heart rate monitors and all these other things, but that's just the surface. Those are massive objects for where we're gonna be. But I think the job of the entrepreneur is really to distill these things so that they're understandable and therefore become useful to us. And, it's just information explosion there, and but designers and people who deal on the computational side and then the scientists behind it, that's the magic in creating long-term valuable companies, is to distill.
Yeah, Jim, your thoughts on this? I mean, in my painkiller fever dream the other night, I woke up thinking, my God, ubiquitous sensing. So much of the human experience has been based on unknowing. We've worked forever to know more. But when you talk about ubiquitous, nano-level knowing or sensing, that seems gigantically disruptive to me. What about the social implications?
So I see it as a net positive, in particular, if you can opt in and opt out. And that is that if you can shut off the information. I'll give you two very simple anecdotes. So I used to be a competitive runner, and nowadays you can make so many different measurements on yourself. And if I was going for a serious workout, getting ready for competition, I might like to know how fast am I going at any given time on the run and tabulate that at the end. But on another given day, I might not want to know. I might not feel good. I might just want to go relax. And there I don't want to know how slowly I'm going, because I think it would make it maybe something more everybody can relate is that if I'm going to try to lose weight, I'd like to see maybe what the calories are on what I'm about to order at the restaurant. But for most of the times, like, I don't want to know. It ruins my meal for me to know that I can't believe it's 750 calories when I'm about to. And so I think I'm concerned that we're going to not only have the information overload, but that it will impact happiness for us, and that I don't want to know in many situations.
Who's Katie Stebbins? Are we all going to have a dashboard on our Google Glass or whatever, you know, feeding all this stuff back to us whether we like it or not? Does that eventually become a where you wake up in the morning and decide how aware I want to be today or how much I want to float in oblivion?
You know, I was thinking about being a parent as that question was being answered. And, you know, as a parent, I have 10 and 12-year-old daughters. I don't necessarily always want to know what they're doing or where they are or the decisions they're making. I could, you know, I don't want to uber control. I mean, I'm a control freak anyway, so I think I gravitate towards this because, oh my God, I could control everything in my world. But there's a certain point that's not healthy. And I think about my family around me, and it's not healthy for them. And you know, there's a certain level of autonomy that we all need, you know, in our lives as humans. And so I think this is going to be a really interesting balance. I do think we're going to have many more dashboards about our information. I think what'll be interesting is who owns the data on those dashboards. You know, if I think about the future of work a lot, and I think about where our jobs are going, will it be my job to just get up in the morning and, as a censored human, go about a set of tasks that I'm being paid to do that I can sell that data back to whoever is seeking it? Will that become a future job? I have no idea, but I think somewhere in data ownership, future of work, I do think that there's something in there that maybe the dashboard of my life is something that's of a commodity that I can actually not have Google making all the money on, but I can actually make some money on what I generated.
A related question from the hall, is anyone on the panel worried about a big brother effect, particularly where governments tend toward autocratic? So I guess you mentioned Google, it wouldn't necessarily be a government that could have a big brother effect. Anybody want to pick that up?
Well, you know, one thing to think about is that there are cases, and I'm sure Vladimir has many of these, where a sensor is better because it senses less. And I'll give you an anecdote. I was in a session last week with representatives of a big car company who think about the interiors of the cars and how the interiors of the cars might change as we go through toward more driverless settings, and how you might arrange it, and how does the car know where the people in the where the people are if they're free to move about inside. And this company was European, actually, and Europeans are actually more sensitive about privacy issues than Americans are. And I said, well, why can't you just have cameras in the car to do that? And the answer was, well, people really don't like cameras inside the car. They do not want to buy a car that has cameras pointing in at them. And you could easily imagine an innovative sensor that tells the car or the system what it needs to know without that kind of invasiveness of a camera, because it is a more efficient streamline of the data. And there must be other examples of things coming out of MIT.nano where you don't have to get the full snapshot. That's actually the cruder way to do it if you're able to sense directly the thing that you care most about.
Yeah, no, I mean, in that particular example, I would imagine that you can make a wallpaper that is really a sound sensor and capable of actually knowing from which point in the car the sound is coming. And as a result, know is the driver speaking or the passenger speaking or the backseat speaking. And it would appear, well, maybe by recognizing a really handsome accent, but no. The point being that I guess I'm imagining the world, and you know, I'm an optimist, so I look at the positive side of things, and I see that we could reduce the car crashes, I imagine, because we would have more awareness on the road where the next vehicles are. We might be able to have a little bit more efficient train system. We might be able to recognize faults in bridges that need to be repaired more rapidly. We might be able to recognize diseases a little bit more sooner, and hence hopefully extend the lifespans. I think we might start taking many of these technologies for granted rather than seeing them as an augmentation of our life. It's just what we expect. We expect that the car shouldn't crash into us, or that it stops despite the fact that I just chose to step into a crosswalk without waiting for the green light. So I think the opportunities in changing the world, I think, will simply blend with the way we experience life rather than seeing it as an intrusion. How much of an intrusion it is, I think that's a societal norm. Our choice to legislate a particular choice of being allowed or not allowed by the, quote, big brother that's above us. Indeed, it's kind of nice to know that big data analytics of Google can recognize the spread of a flu because they can monitor, how many searches are there for cough drops or, nice chamomile tea. Oh, I do not know what else they use, but those are useful pieces of data to recognize and alert us to the sets of opportunities or challenges we might be facing because we are responding to the sensing of the global society at large rather than just being closed-eyed and saying, I do not want to know.
But in a
Sensing wallpaper, we used to say if these walls could talk, the stories they could tell, and perhaps they will. People are very politically attuned these days. There's another question from the audience. On your upside, or looking forward anyway, Vladimir, how can the ubiquity of sensing technology improve the lives of citizens in an increasingly polarized world? I feel someone's mind searching here for less polarization somehow through more sensing or more knowing. Can you imagine that?
I guess I personally can. I think misunderstandings lead to conflict. Not all the time. There are other sources of conflict, but one element of misunderstanding is the lack of data. Coming up with a way to recognize that, for example, Bill Friedman just showed us a video of person's face flushing with blood and then not flushing. What he was doing is exaggerating the heart beating, right?
Heartbeat.
Well, and I believe his studies also show that you can recognize when people are a bit embarrassed or, because again, you can monitor the flow of blood through the face that we really cannot pick up as humans, but fine instruments of sensing would allow us to do that. That information is very valuable, right? From perspective of reducing conflict or reducing embarrassing information or whatever it is, right? I mean, you can use it for a negative way, but you can also use it as a very positive element. Again, it's a social choice on how we choose to utilize the data sets. And I feel having the data is good to have so I can make the choice I want to be able to apply it in a positive or negative way.
Tremendous power. Yes. No. Tremendous power either way. Another question from the audience here. How can we use nanotechnology to improve learning and education? Does anybody on the panel see a direct application? A line between learning and education and the application of nanotechnology in particular, or sensing?
I'll just give a brief one. Certain areas of brain need to be fired up in order to enable you to study better. And if you can monitor the brain function in detail, we might be able to reduce the amount of time you open a book and actually study. Or you might be able to indeed find the right moment of time to go ahead and open a book and study more effectively. In order to see that action in the brain, you better have a set of sensing technologies we right now do not have readily available.
Well, Bill Freeman's
wow.
talk
So
today.
This is the moment. Study now because your brain is open. Right now, go. Yeah,
Yes.
I guess I could have used that.
Well, I was going to say,
Is a very practical
Bill Freeman's
question.
talk from earlier today.
How many years until sensing technology can do something like restore vision to someone blinded by a neurological disorder like multiple sclerosis? Jim, is that anywhere in your wheelhouse?
It's not directly my area of expertise, but certainly there are technologies, biomedical technology, I'm not sure they'd classify as nano, but certainly laser efforts underway to improve function. Again, I think we're not where we'd like to be really in any condition yet. I suspect that nanomaterials is really where we'll see, I think, a lot of benefit from the neural side in terms of dealing with neurodegeneration, whether it be at the chemical in a type of a small molecule and or from a material that could actually be used to restore direct function of the electrochemical property of a neuron.
Vladimir, thoughts on that particular front?
Oh, I'm not a biologist, so I wouldn't claim I truly understand it. I just know that I need to excite some neurons and my brain will interpret a response, right? I mean, kids, when they are born, they're trying to figure out how to use their eyes, right? I mean, I think in the first weeks or months, it just looks like blurs of flashes coming into their eyes, and then they start recognizing edges, and then they start recognizing colors and shapes and on. So from my perspective, I just look at it as an electrical engineer. I just need to provide a little bit of voltage to stimulate the neuron, and then the brain, Jim, right, will do the rest of it. So, and is that possible? Yeah. Absolutely. There are very many different ways you can indeed provide stimulation. Now, we can go into the details, but even the tattoos back from the 1970s would used chemicals that would cause response under illumination with sunlight, causing apparently burning sensations. And likely what's happening is you essentially generate little solar cells, nanoscale size, that were activating your neurons. Again, I'm not a biologist to truly understand that, but I, by all means, would say, yes, we should be able to understand it. And we also got to hear some talks today about the opportunities of that. Indeed, injecting nanoscale objects at the ends of neurons and hopefully generating stimulation that can then one day be interpreted as a picture.
Could we just think for a second a bit more about the difference between the Internet of Things, which has received so much attention, and ubiquitous nano sensing? Where are they overlapping? Where are they quite different? What's the difference? Anyone?
I mean, I think of Internet of Things as connecting physical objects and sending data back and forth. So maybe it's an extension of that, but at a much richer, deeper level. I feel I failed explaining that, but I just think of, I don't know, Vlad, what do you got?
Well,
what do you got, Vlad?
So I guess I'm imagining, what if one day we really can sense graviton waves? What would that do for us? I do not quite know how to do that. We saw a first couple, right, just not so long ago using MIT technology. But what would that do? I mean, are we able to then from there, through that understanding, develop the understanding of anti-gravity? Are we able to then from there build on new energy sources? Are we, being able to see more allows us to understand more, right? The first time we looked at the stars, we just used visible light. But then we started recognizing if you look in the infrared light, we can find the source of Big Bang, especially if you look at very, very long wavelength light. Well, that's kind of cool, because now you can start recognizing a very different way of how the universe has been put together than what one visible image would show you.
But it is like Internet of Things, and that data has to come back to something.
Absolutely.
And what is that thing it comes back to? So that's...
Well, indeed, we do have to analyze all the sensing information, but not having it is not as good as having it. We can choose to ignore the data that we get, but having that extra data set would open our horizons in ways we could not previously imagine. A picture's worth a million words rather than picture, right? I mean, being able to see how things look, you can start imagining functions and processes you couldn't do if you couldn't see.
And Jim, I guess there's another distinction that interests me from what you've said. Can you describe a difference between nano intervention in biology and genetic engineering? Is there a difference, or do you see it as the same thing?
I think they're overlapping. I think you can have, no question, you can have nano intervention in biology that does not involve genetic engineering. But I would also qualify most genetic engineering as being a form of nanobiotechnology. And that is, in genetic engineering, you're largely manipulating nucleic acids. So you're manipulating DNA or RNA that's basically at a nanoscale. And so you're doing it through enzymes, whether it's the old recombinase enzymes of the 70s or the newer CRISPR-Cas enzymes that have become popular in the last few years. However, nano is much broader than just enzymatic manipulation of DNA. As we heard earlier today, in that you have nanorods, you have nanotubes, you've got nanodots that are impacting living cells. I think that the greatest impact we'll see, though, is actually directly manipulating the biological material. I think we will see increased utilization of biological material for a variety of purposes, and that's where the tools of nanotech, whether enzymatic and chemical and or mechanical, will allow us to manipulate these molecules for a wide range of applications.
Brian Anthony this morning spoke of the grand challenges in this field. And I guess I'd put to all of you how you see the biggest challenges that lie in front of us as we look at ubiquitous sensing, nanotechnology, the grand challenges. How would you begin to frame them? Maybe, David, you could start.
Well, it's one you're already seeing with the Internet of Things, which is only just beginning to get going, which is already been alluded to. There's just so much data that we're only beginning to learn algorithmically how to sort through that. A lot of data is just getting stored, and people don't really understand what it might be useful for. So there's certainly a grand challenge just in the sense of mining and bringing the best tools that we have to the data that's being collected today, much less the scale of the things that Vladimir and others are talking about, to really make sense of it in a way that's consumable by human beings in a way that is helpful to us. That grand challenge is here today, and we haven't even really begun to see ubiquitous nanosensors. I mean, the Internet of Things is the sort of, at some level, it's the 1920s version of radio, where we're still with the toasters and the clock radios, and that's kind of cool. But there's a long way to go before that sensing is ubiquitous, and even with the toasters and the clock radios, it's getting pretty complicated.
Katie Stebbins, how about you when you think of grand challenges in this arena?
Again, I think for me as someone who's in public service, I certainly look to where the benefits are going to be. We talked about dam. We talk about just information around us that, again, in a government role, my job at the end of the day is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the constituents that we have. And the information that we're talking about, and having so much information, and how we sort through it and make it useful so that we can maximize that value proposition for government in a way that I would hope ends up reducing costs, but maximizing quality of life. And I know that sounds sort of cliche and sort of general, but in a public service role, I think it's important for government to be able to, it's always an ambition to spend less tax dollars and do more with what we have. And I think that there's a lot of promise here to do that. I think infrastructure, in particular, infrastructure is incredibly expensive. The infrastructure that surrounds us in all different ways is expensive, and the repair and maintenance of it. To get to a place where that is a much easier, much cheaper, much nicer taxpayer benefit would be great.
How do you see regional competitiveness in this arena? We saw what happened in the digital era between 128 and Silicon Valley. How do you see the nano era sorting out regionally, Katie Stebbins, in terms of competitiveness?
I get this question, I think, every single time I speak anywhere, and I equate it to the Red Sox trading Babe Ruth. Like, we have such a hard time in Boston with that, oh God, we traded Babe Ruth and we lost the microprocessor, and we're never going to recover from this. And of course we have. And we are very competitive, obviously, as a region. Boston, I think, is going to have a very, very huge mark in this space. However, as I work more with faculty at all of our institutions, what I also come to learn is our faculty work in collaboration with other faculty around the country and around the world. And it's naive to think that we do anything in total isolation, but certainly we want to be able to be delivering the patents and the new technologies and the breakthroughs here in Massachusetts. So that's a balance, because we're a state. We want our entire country to rise up. Massachusetts can't just be 6 million successful people and the rest of the country just get whatever's left over. So there's always a tension in that with my job, but I think that Massachusetts plays a leadership role that allows the other states in our country some closer than others, to come with us. And I think that in this area, we will certainly be playing a leadership role in that same way.
Katie Ray, what about Deshpandey's challenge to make these new breakthroughs applied not just to the top 2 billion, but to the whole 7 billion? How do you see the nano developments coming, working in that regard? Is it going to be just repairing the bodies of the wealthy so that they become Ray Kurzweil, immortals? Or what about the opportunity here for widespread dissemination of the upside benefits?
Yeah, I mean, I think that any entrepreneur that is working to have massive impact, there's practicalities about where to start and then where you hope that to go. I mean, I think we've seen this over and over again, that sometimes, yes, it does cluster with the rich in the beginning, but if you want to extend and grow, you have to make it more cost effective and therefore more accessible to people. I think that pattern will play out again. I also think there's really interesting things that happen where economies that are not as developed can adopt things first. And I think entrepreneurs, especially this generation, the new generation, like the people just coming out of school, think about that a lot. There's a deep kind of sense of mission. You want to be in mission-based companies. I hear more about that than I've ever heard. And I think that's really exciting and plays to how I think the work Desh does around the world. And so I think there have been patterns about starting with the rich and then moving downward, but I think we will see patterns where it starts with the less fortunate, the less wealthy nations and moves upward. And I don't know how that works out, but I see entrepreneurs pushing on both ends, and I think that's incredibly exciting. So,
Vlad, wrap this up for us. When you see MIT, say MIT.nano, you kind of got me from hello. It just sounds like a natural. But you have a spectacular new building coming up there and a kind of vision for the role that you hope it will play, and a kind of connective tissue that the whole nano enterprise may prove for the Institute. How do you hope that the building, the Center of Excellence, the whole effort plays out in terms of the internal chemistry of MIT?
Well, thank you for asking that, Tom, because indeed, specifying MIT.nano is just a building, I think, misses the point. MIT.nano will not have any private laboratories. There'll be not a single private faculty office or a student office inside MIT.nano. The whole building is designed to serve as a shared space, all 200,000 square feet. And as a result, it better be able to support the entire community of users that right now we estimate is over 2,000 when we open in June next year. And in a decade, it might grow to 3,000, 4,000. It better not be that the only users of MIT.nano are MIT students, postdocs, staff. It better be that we just as comfortably invite and partner up with others to step into MIT.nano. I always point to the fact that we only have 2 products, right, as an institution. We generate knowledge, we train amazing people who come to us amazing to start off with, and we push them to try a few extra things. So it better be that MIT.nano gives us a playground for teaching like no other in the world. It better be we have the tool sets that has never been seen before, and it better be that we spend time asking what's the next set of tool sets we can give to the world so we can impart that impact on the world. Because with impact, we perpetuate our mission, which is change the world for the better and hopefully attract the next generation of amazing students to come and join us, because that last thing was invented at MIT.
Well, I have to say, today seems like a pretty good rollout for that vision and that role for MIT.nano, the building, and beyond. It's been a real education for me, and I'm sure everybody in the hall there, Vlad and Jim and Katie and David. I want to thank all of you for sitting down for this panel. I know you have more program to come. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be part of this day, and thank you very much for including me. I will watch with rapt attention as this all rolls forward. Good luck, and thank you very much for including me today.
Thank you.
And Tom, once again, thank you very much. And next time, we won't let you be juggling with a samurai, and we'll have you here. Very good. Thank you.
I promise.
Panelists, thank you very much. I would ask if you can just hold tight for a few minutes. I'm going to invite the AV folks to help disconnect. The last segment of today is actually the people that get the work done around here. So we'll be hearing 1-minute poster pitches from the student representatives of the posters that you're going to see in the hall during refreshments. So we just need a little bit of time to disconnect AV. So give us a minute, but thank the panelists and don't move. Thank you.